Paul, which countries are doing a great job when it comes to electric electrical infrastructure as well as the EV in
Mhm.
transportation? Which country is number one right now?
You know the answer to that one. You know the answer. You're going to get me in trouble. So in 2009, in 2019, I had the chance um, to visit China. I went to China. They invited a group of 20 climate tech companies to come and pitch and do conferences. And we met with.
Okay, for over a century, transportation depends on one thing, gasoline. Today, we are witnessing one of the largest infrastructure transition in modern history. Long before electric vehicles became mainstream, Paul Francis were already building charging infrastructure, energy platform, and mobility solutions designed for a very different future. As the co-founder of KIGT and a managing director of eStation Group, Paul has spent more than 16 years operating at the intersection of energy, mobility, infrastructure, climate technology, and entrepreneurship. He has worked with the startups, utilities, investors, corporations, and public sector leaders to help bridge the gap between innovation and real world deployment. Today, we are going to talk about the future of energy, EV infrastructure, climate technology, startup building, and what founders can learn from operating in industries that take years, not months, to mature. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Anshuman, thank you for having me. Glad to be here with you.
Great. So, Paul, first thing first, take me to your early journey. What made you interested in EV tech?
Mm. Well, quick story. In my early days, it was 2008, that great recession. My daughter was born, and I decided after seeing loads of friends unable to get jobs with their degrees to start my entrepreneur journey then and start my own business in transportation. While I was in university, I did multiple entrepreneurial endeavors while taking classes. But once my daughter was born on my birthday, I said that was a sign that I need to start on my own and have an education in business and actually do a thing and start a business. So we started a transportation company, and we were simply taking folks with disabilities to programs. And we also had contracts for those of you who are familiar with California. They have Native American casinos. And we had contracts taking elderly people to bingo. But during that time, gasoline was expensive like it is now. And I had a friend said, look into natural gas or electric. And we were so ahead of the time. This was now 2009. And the more I delve deeper into EV, I said, this has to be a solution for the future. One day, I'm sitting at a Starbucks. I see a Scion XB come into the Starbucks. It's all electric. And I was unsure that the Japanese already made electric cars. I talked to the man who was driving it. He said, we're AC propulsion. We're on the other side of the freeway from you. Come check us out next week if you have transportation contracts. I went there to visit them. I discovered the founders of that company, Anshuman, were the founders, the original founders of Tesla. They created the drivetrain. They created a separate company that made the drivetrain for electric cars. They plugged in an EV and it powered the building. And at that moment, I was hooked for life, understanding the power of how electric cars can provide power for families and buildings and societies. And I've been stuck ever since.
So,
Stuck in a good way.
yeah, yeah. You really started building EV charging station in 2009. What did you see back then that most people missed? Early market signals, what were those? How did you identify it that, it is going to be the EV cars were not out then, or only handful, but you were talking about EV charging stations. How did that happen?
Initially, it was EVs. Working with AC propulsion, we began to get contracts with universities doing rideshare and
Hmm.
bundling electric cars with charging with different cities, municipals. pilot projects with the city of West Covina. We donate a charger, bring the Scion XB for each department to drive for a week and collect the data. We did this with city of South El Mani and other municipals. And we realized at the time the pain point wasn't the EV, because AC Propulsion, they made the drivetrain for BMW Mini E, the Nissan Leaf, and we were telling cities, convert your gasoline cars that are 5 to 10 years old in your fleet that are costing you money to do the maintenance into EV. We'll convert them for you and we'll get grant funding. That didn't catch on, but we realized the charging infrastructure, that was the linchpin, that was the centerpiece. And I remember one day we're getting ready to do a vehicle to grid demonstration in the parking lot for City of South El Mani. And I told the utility weeks ago we were going to do this. And then all of a sudden they had a surprise inspection on the transformer that was near the fleet yard and said we could not conduct this experiment. We waited hours till nighttime. We did it anyway. We lit the parking lot lights with the electric car, a third of the parking lot lights with one car. And I realized that's the true power, but the charging infrastructure wasn't compatible for the future. So that's when we decided, I say about 4 years later from when I got into the industry and met AC Propulsion, to become a manufacturer of chargers so that they can conduct that bi-directional energy flow. And so from 2013 to 2014, when we reincorporated, that's when we became an original equipment manufacturer of EV chargers. And I knew then that millions and billions of people around the world eventually would adopt EV, just like we adopted mobile phones. And so when you look at it from that perspective, there's always an arc. Look at Tesla in his original days. They saw the vision of electricity. So when you look at the future of what can be used in utility and how the rest of the world can benefit from a thing, you go towards that thing and you try to build it and you make your space there in that sector.
Right, right. So when you were building in a market that really fully exists or didn't even exist at that point of time, what were the instinct that told you that you were early versus simply wrong? And look where we are today. I have been driving Tesla for the last 5-6 years now, and I just love it. The FSD is so good.
They still called me crazy. And then they said, we didn't hear early because we were around. One thing I will tell entrepreneurs, once I committed to this industry, I always went to industry events. I became a student. I would go to conferences. I joined committees with the electrical utility. I was adopted into the state of California kind of political landscape. And so when I'm around it, it doesn't feel like I'm ahead of the time, because the companies that are public now, EVgo, back then they were NRG. ChargePoint, back then they were Coolum. And I worked with all of them. So all of us in those early days, we didn't feel that we were ahead. We felt that we were right on time and we were at the frontier and the pioneers to set the foundation for what the future would be. And so it kept us the confidence. The most challenging thing was finding other entrepreneurs and smart engineers. I'm not an engineer by trade, that to come on this journey with us and to build something incredible. So it took a couple of years to find the right team and engineers to go forward with our own first product and software. To me, that was the most challenging part. It was finding entrepreneurs also crazy enough to come along the journey.
Right. So what were some of the hardest moment, Paul, building in the climate tech before it became a popular investment category? Because you need funding, and there were not that many climate tech investors, early stage investors, the angel investors, who would like to invest in an EV company. So you must have went through a lot of hardest moment when where you were looking for capital. How was that journey?
You hit it right on the head. It was incredibly hard. It didn't get easier till 2019. Our first investors were angel investors. Quick story. My friend's family, very successful family, they owned 20 different McDonald's locations. And I had gone to school with this person in high school. We played in the same youth sports leagues growing up. So we knew one another. And I told him back in 2010, I'm starting this company. They all said I was crazy. I was pitching the family in their big boardroom, my first ever pitch. And I was terrible. I was absolutely terrible. I give founders this advice: don't pitch millionaires on how to be a millionaire or a thousandaire. Tell them how they're going to be billionaires with this investment. And it's not just about the money, it's more so about the vision.
Right.
Because you can't teach someone with money how to make more money the same way they're making money. But if you can paint a picture and a vision for something bigger that's going to have global impact, that's what you should do. And that's what I did not do in my first pitch. Literally, the brother in the meeting fell asleep on me in the meeting, woke up, and then told the patriarch, the father, hey, we have to go to another business venture. Left the room. My friend and his sister, who were still in the meeting, they stayed. And that's when I got to the good part about the bigger picture and the global impact. She stopped me and said, why didn't you begin with that? Why didn't you start with that part of the pitch?
Mm-hmm.
They did not write their first angel check till 3 years later. And it was because they saw my grit and I kept going, doing those pilot projects. And one day they came to me and I wrote my goal down. True story. I said, we must raise $150,000. My co-founder was getting ready to quit. His godfather talking about letting him go. 2 days later, they gave me a call, said, we're going to write the first check for you. And we went from there. And I would say they continued to write checks for another few years. So eventually they gave us $350,000. But we didn't raise our first kind of venture grant funding, I said, for 7 more years. It took forever. So for us, we continued to grow through that little amount of investment, small grants, and revenue. We got customers in 2017. We kept getting customers, and we doubled revenue without investment from VC. And that gave us the confidence to push forward once we got that early traction.
Right, great. So the future of energy and mobility, most people think that the EV are these stories. So many cars coming out and, electric vehicles and whatnot, commercial trucks. It is going to change how people drive, all those things. Why did you believe that infrastructure is actually the bigger story?
Imagine a world where every morning you wake up and you have a full tank. Then every time you leave work, you still have a full tank. And when you go to happy hour with your friends after work and you leave, you still have a full tank. And then when you get home at night, that car provides the power for you and your family to enjoy TV, Wi-Fi, whatever you need to cook meals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's infrastructure. And that's why I said it's not the car, it's not just the charger, but it's an entire ecosystem of infrastructure. To achieve that vision, to have billions of people in emerging markets like India and Africa benefit from this, like we're starting to see now, it began with the infrastructure. The automotive companies already had the EV. But to support that, you had to have utility support. You had to have political support. Because to get infrastructure done, especially in America, you need permit approvals. You need utility approvals to put 4 megawatts of power at a site that we're building now in Southern California. And from there, I understood I have to build relationships. So I started getting on committees and boards for climate initiatives with utilities. Politically, I was invited to the White House in 2022. We began to apply for different incubators and accelerators to be more connected, because it's not just external infrastructure, Anshuman. It's also human capital and human infrastructure that's needed. And it's an entire ecosystem if you're going to build a mobility and energy business. And so that's when I knew it takes more than just building a widget. Because you can build the most magnificent widget with the most magnificent features. But if you're in the energy business and you do not have the support from the municipal, from the state, and the utility, nothing big will happen. So I understood at that point, to make infrastructure a real thing for mobility, you have to build those relationships, show the capital that you have those relationships and that traction that will support you on your venture, for them then to fund your idea to actually implement and commercialize. And so at the end of the day, in mobility, you need everyone together just for one charger to plug in. I always told my friend and co-founders, before you actually put the charger in the ground, before it's installed, you're in every other business but EV charging. And you had to learn that the hard way in the early days, that it takes an entire ecosystem of people just to put 10 chargers in the ground. It's no easy feat, but when you love what you do, it becomes an exciting process.
So, Paul, let's talk about the transportation. How close are we to truly electrified transportation future? Adoption rate, grid readiness, consumer behavior, so many moving parts. What do you see in the future? How close are we? How many more years it will take to a truly electrified transportation future?
We're here. It's already here. Let me ask you a question real quick so we can frame it for the audience. When you ask, are you speaking of America or the rest of the world?
To start with America.
It takes cooperation. In my personal opinion, America has a lot of bureaucracy. And for climate tech to effectively have true impact, we have to take the politics out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because climate is not a red or blue thing. It's a human thing. And these are human solutions. And so you're seeing it happen now with more infrastructure, more companies. Automotive industries now are starting to invest in the actual charging infrastructure and creating coalitions. But at the same time, we have to be practical about who the American consumer is. And idealism. Americans love big, loud, strong, fast cars. They love their gasoline. And so for that, I've always understood there must be a balance. You're never going to have all electric, but you must have a balance of electric and internal combustion engine for this really to work. And so I honestly think we won't have full scale adoption. My daughter's 18 now, by the way. She drives a Nissan Leaf till she's a parent, because now you have that generation beginning to drive EV. They love it. But the charging infrastructure still pales in the advancement that the automotive industry has done with the cars like Rivian and Tesla, and now the new BMW M-Class EVs. So I think what must happen is folks like you, investors, private equity, more than venture capital, must come in and supply massive amounts of capital to support the infrastructure build out. Like you're seeing with AI and data center, there's a lot of momentum. And I think that same momentum must be crossed over, because the infrastructure required, the energy for data center, was required before EV. And so I think right now, what's happened, it's highly politicized. And people now are not seeing the true value of what EVs can bring to their life. It's just, oh, here's a little battery. There's not enough charging. This administration pushed this electric car thing on us. We're against it. But what you're starting to see during power outages, especially in Texas, cars can power your home during emergency response. So we need to see how electric car, in my opinion, can be more utility than mobility. How it can become a secondary source, eventually the main source of power and electricity for renewables, so we can balance out the grid for new data centers. And I think once you get private equity or bigger venture capital involved and see long-term vision, patient capital can be pushed and back companies that have bigger vision, that say, look, you may not get a return for another 10 to 15 years, but this isn't about ROI or valuation. This is about market cap and impact. And your investment will have an ROI. However, you must have faith and put the money behind the entrepreneurs now that
Correct.
really want to build this out.
Okay. Paul, which countries are doing a great job when it comes to electric electrical infrastructure as well as the EV in
Mhm.
transportation? Which country is number one right now?
You know the answer to that one. You know the answer. You're going to get me in trouble. So in 2009, in 2019, I had the chance um, to visit China. I went to China. They invited a group of 20 climate tech companies to come and pitch and do conferences. And we met with the China State Grid. And I'm sharing them our electric charging infrastructure, our plans to build out, to build mobility hubs. But then I showed them how small our EV was for home. Because now I believe in the future, more EV charging will be for home
Mhm.
because EVs will have more range. And they laughed and they said, because China loves everything big. They said, oh, that charger's too small. But the fact that when I went, they already had NEO. BYD had yet kind of hit the uptick. They were just a battery company. However, they had BYD vehicles everywhere, NEO electric cars everywhere in China by the millions. And I think that's because China understands the future opportunity in mobility with electrification. They put massive investment behind it as a country, and they've backed their companies. Well, unfortunately, like I said, here in America, we politicized EV. And so you had one administration put billions of dollars into EV, and then the next administration took all that money away from EV projects. And so I'm not saying China's the example, but I'm saying they've done it the best because they fully committed and they put whatever necessary capital towards building out the engineers, the infrastructure, the battery technology, and they got better at building the machine that builds the cars. The next, I would say India is doing a fantastic job now of emerging. Um, but the new exciting opportunity, the new frontier, Anshuman, is Africa. It's
Mhm.
Africa for sure. You see this new electric vehicle scooter business just received a couple $100 million in VC backing to scale across the continent. I just moved to Australia a couple of years ago, and they're now starting to hit the ground, and they're fully in as well because it's not politicized. The government is putting capital behind the entrepreneurs that want to build the infrastructure. So I would say first is China, then America still, but I fear we might fall behind because now India, Africa, and Australia are putting massive amount of capital behind mobility and electrification and energy. So I say globally right now, it's an exciting time for our industry. And if you're an investor, if you're an entrepreneur in this space, continue to keep going because we're still at our infancy and it's only going to get more exciting.
Paul, paint a picture how the mobility ecosystem is going to look in 10 years here in the US.
I remember when I first met my partner. I have a 1 year old now. And when we first met, I was telling her about what we were building. And I said, we're going to have flying electric cars and autonomous EVs. The first thing she asked me was, who's going to insure all of this? Where's the insurance coming from? I say, oh, you're such a banker. That's a banker response to the future. But I see electric scooters. I see autonomous EVs. I see flying electric cars because it's already happening in other countries, not in America yet. Tesla just got their first permits approved in Phoenix, Arizona for their autonomous EV hubs. We have our permits approved by the city of Ontario and Southern California Edison for 4 megawatts of power to build an autonomous EV hub in Southern California. So I say in 10 years, what you're going to see are less people driving, more autonomous EV fleets. You're going to see more vehicle to grid. That picture I painted where you imagine every morning you wake up and then at night those cars. I say in 10 years, billions of people around the world will use their electric cars as a source of power for their home. And now, if you're talking about emerging markets and other third world countries having access to power with an electric scooter or a compact EV, now you're going to give them more access to information because now they can access Wi-Fi and internet. I know when I go to Sri Lanka to visit my partner's family, the power goes out sometimes still. But imagine if the car that was parked in their garage, because they have a Nissan Leaf, had the effective infrastructure to power the home when the power went out. And when I'm in Sri Lanka, sometimes I can't work for hours because of the power shortage. So I see in 10 years consistent power, renewable power, and more people having access to information and Wi-Fi. And as a byproduct, I believe, my optimism, more entrepreneurs will create more inventive things for the future because of the electric car, because they'll have access to power and internet at that point.
Right, right. I agree with you on that. So in this segment, we are going to talk about the climate tech capital and the commercialization. Paul, you have worked with founders, investors, utilities companies, and corporations. Why do so many climate tech startups struggle to scale? What are the roadblocks?
That's such a great question because there's so many variables to that.
Yeah.
So many, but I'll start with this. For investors and founders, they have to reframe it. Yeah, we're building technology, but we're not traditional tech. And because that word climate tech, it gives a misconception of the industry that we're in. We're not building just software. We're not building websites. We're modern day industrialists. And once you consider yourself now as an industrialist instead of building tech, then you'll approach the right type of capital. I think for so long, incubators and accelerators, it's a sizzle, sexy word to say climate tech. And then VCs come in thinking they're investing in tech when they are, but it's tech that requires patience because you need utilities involved to get approvals. You need municipals involved to get approvals. You need tens of millions for one single project, hundreds of millions for local projects, and billions of dollars for national scalability. And once investors and the entrepreneurs in climate tech realize we're climate industrialists, then the capital behind that will understand what's required. That's why I shifted my view from talking to more private equity investors because their return on investment and their expectation is different from VC. Not better, just different. And I think that's the type of capital that gives entrepreneurs in our space the peace of mind that the folks who are giving us the money to back our idea aren't putting pressure on us to raise every 12 to 18 months. Because early traction is not necessarily revenues in our industry. It's a pilot project, and it may not be paid, but that's the traction that's required for 5 years. And private equity understands that a little bit differently. Because one thing I told the White House when I was invited there in 2022, I was invited to the White House with the past administration to discuss infrastructure, mobility, and electrification. And I remember I told VCs this in 2018 when we were pitching for UCR, UC Riverside's incubator.
Right.
And when we were pitching Clean Tech San Diego, we would like relationships with real estate investors. And unfortunately, VCs love to see focused entrepreneurs that are focused on one thing. They're going to run experiments, get a feedback loop. And that's understandable. You don't want an entrepreneur that's scattered and all over the place. But when you're building infrastructure, when you're building industrial size impact energy systems, you can't build anything without real estate. And when you say that as an early entrepreneur to a VC, they think you're all over the place. Oh, he wants to be a real estate person. He wants to build chargers. He wants to build energy. But it's all part of it. Like, I can't build a site with charging without real estate. And then we've built projects at churches, faith-based organizations. We were the ones who put the chargers at San Diego Convention Center and Los Angeles County Fairgrounds during COVID. My team put 200 in. But guess what happened at the site? The chargers would go broken.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't give us the maintenance contract to fix it. And investors didn't give us the money to provide a maintenance side of the business. And so that's why I say the capital behind it must be private equity, because if we had controlled the real estate, we could have controlled the uptime and controlled the chargers that we put into the ground. Because when you're just a charger business, they buy it from you and then you go. There's no recurring revenue unless you own that asset at that site. And VCs love recurring revenue. Private equity loves market cap and scale. And I think if you can get a blend of both working together, smart capital now between VC and private equity, energy entrepreneurs will thrive, and you'll see more projects and more companies staying together. Because now in our industry, you see this guy went to this climate tech, this guy went to that climate tech. Tesla fired their whole EV charging team 2 years ago. I know teams that have gone under. And that's because, honestly, in my opinion, I'm a little biased, VCs got impatient. And they changed founders because they weren't hitting their target and their metrics after they raised. Mm-hmm. So it's just different capital is required, man.
Right. Great answer, Paul. What separates climate tech startups that get deployed from those that remain just as a great ideas?
Those who have the money.
Okay.
Those who have the money, the political connections, and the grit. Energy is not it's not an easy man's game. I'm third generation energy. My grandfather worked for Westinghouse in Pennsylvania. Westinghouse was the first investor of Tesla when he put in his AC system. Mm-hmm. They lived in the community Westinghouse built for his employees. My mom worked for Southern California Edison. And I grew up in energy. So for me, I've always been around it and I love it. And so the difference is if you're in climate tech, you have to love what you do. You have to love actual industrial change. You must have patience. You must have the right investors that believe in you and enormous amounts of capital and the political connections to actually get projects done and approved to get them in the ground.
Yeah, understood. In this segment, we are going to talk about, Paul, founders' lessons. You coach startups today. What are the 3 mistakes the founders consistently make?
So are you asking mistakes they make when they're raising capital or when they're actually out deploying and working on the idea?
Early on in their journey, from ideation stage to fundraising, they make a ton of mistakes. What you have been seeing consistently that the founders are making, 3, 4, something like that?
That's a tough question. That's a tough one. In climate tech, specifically, well, I say tech in general, I think entrepreneurs, they don't stick with the rosy idea. They have this big vision. And after they get rejected multiple times, they change the idea or the vision or they get discouraged. If you're going to be in energy, you're going to hear tons of no's every day of your life. So quitting is one, or changing too early. That's the first one. When raising capital, it's choosing the wrong investors to meet with, not doing their own diligence. Often we just think, oh, here's a VC. I want to pitch the VC. Here's our opportunity to get some money. And you are not the right fit for the VC, and he was not the right fit, or she was not the right fit for you. And that can be discouraging because then you'll sit down with 10 investors and she'll tell you no, he'll tell you no, this group will tell you no, and now you're thinking my idea is not good enough, I have to switch the vision. But really, you didn't meet with the right capital. So I think it's doing diligence, actually researching before you go out and starting your fundraise round, so that you're getting the proper feedback, even if the investors tell you no, so that you can still have that relationship with them if they say you're early, because now they're in your lane. And as you grow, like we did 3 years later, finally our angels gave us our first check because now they're within your same ecosystem. So I would say quitting too soon, not connecting with the proper investors.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say not making a really good product.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of entrepreneurs are making the same thing. And because they have this idea, they think they should get invested or it should just work. But a charger is a charger is a charger. Our charger wasn't too much different from everyone else's. And so I say, don't focus too much on the tech, but know the fundamentals of your business and why it will make money and scale and be dominant in the marketplace once you hit commercialization. Understand your business, not the features of your tech.
Right.
Understand how you can add value to people's lives, not just that your idea is cool. And lastly, one thing we did wrong, and I told my co-founder just a few months ago in our early days, we created a product where there was no problem. We were solving a solution that didn't need one. We created a great idea and a great technology, but there was no problem we were solving, not at the time at least. So if you're going to build something you care about and you love, make sure that you're solving a proper problem. Find the problem first. Then build your idea and your tech and your features around one or two problems. Then go and test it to the market before you sit in the lab and build all these amazing things in your head that people you think will like. And you come to find out they can care less about. And you spent years doing that. When you didn't go to the market, solve one problem, get feedback, realize that this was good or not, and then double down on that, then show that to the investors. At that moment, that's when the investors will believe, they'll give you the capital, your team won't quit, you'll continue to push forward, and then you'll be successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do investors consistently look out for the founders, and the founders often underestimate those skills? Team quality, market understanding, execution capability is what you have seen happening in the market.
I'm going to first flip this because you're an investor. And I'm going to say to founders, don't worry about no's or investors telling you you don't have the right team because you don't come from the background that's of the status quo. My entire career, I was told by how I look, I'm not the proper CEO for my company. We don't have the right background. We don't have the right team. And my pushback was, I'm in the EV charging business and I've done EV charging for over a decade. What more do you want from me? Maybe I did not come from Stanford. Maybe I did not come from Harvard. But those are children building just ideas in their dorm room. I'm a man out here connecting with real humans, building commercialization products. And for some reason, I think investors underestimate the true grit because of an entrepreneur because they don't come from the background they're used to of all these other young 19, 20, 22-year-olds coming from university. These are kids who haven't experienced the real world, and investors say, this is the team because they come from this school and they have this family and they're the ones. And traditionally, those are the ones who get the checks from the VCs. But that's why 90% of venture capital companies fail, in my personal opinion, because investors are looking at for the proper background or the status quo of the team from what university they come from instead of the heart of the entrepreneur. I love sports. I used to play college basketball. And I followed the NBA. Still do. And I don't know if you follow it, but the New York Knicks just won the NBA championship after 50 plus years.
Yeah.
And the leader of their team was someone every coach and organization said wasn't good enough. He's too small. He's not athletic enough. Jalen Brunson proved everyone wrong, won championship with his team, put them on his shoulder, and beat the player who everyone said is the world's best. He's the up and coming. He's 7 feet. He ticks all the boxes. And this guy with the most heart and the most grit, who was undersized, kicked his ass and they won the championship because his team believed and they all believed in the leader because he had the heart. And I would say to investors, don't overlook founders because they may not come from the proper background. Look at what they built, look at their heart, look at their grit, and invest in that. And then I would say to founders, put the proper team around you, mate. If you don't come from that background and you know that's what investors are looking for, find inventive engineers or business people from those backgrounds. Dive deep into the ecosystem and go to the conferences, go to the lectures, go to the universities where you may find these folks to build your team to join you on your crazy idea and your vision. Because investors are looking to back teams before ideas. There's no way around that. So I say there's lessons to be learned on both sides. You must build a strong team. And then don't believe just because you have a great idea and you're in this big market and you can get 1% of the market, you guys will make billions of dollars. That's the most foolish thing I hear because it's not easy to get 1% of the market. It's never easy. And so when you're looking at it from a perspective like that, you'll fail. But when you look at it from a perspective, our idea can solve this problem better than anyone. And from this segment, we know who has this one problem in our industry, and we're going to solve that problem better than anyone as a team. That's something that investors can get excited by, especially if you started getting early traction. And don't wait for your first check. If this is what you do, then this is who you are. Go find out a way. I'm going to tell the truth. When I was building the business in the early days, I had multiple jobs. I was still a basketball referee 5-6 days a week, paying for the vision before we got our first angel check, doing whatever I can because I believe in it so much. And that's why I say investors, look at the grit also, but founders, don't think like, oh, we raised money, we're going to go give VC and we've made it. One thing I always used to tell my co-founders, okay, say we get a VC check on Friday, term sheet comes. On Monday, we must go get sales. We must get customers. Did we prepare ourselves to get customers, or did we only prepare to get a VC check? Because you can set yourself up for failure, even if VCs back you. So solve an important problem. Go visit with customers before you get your first investor check, and then reiterate from there. And make sure your team, if you guys don't have VC funding, and I know VCs don't like to hear this, but you must have side jobs to support the vision. You must have guys who can hustle and tell the venture capitalists that we have hustle and we have side things, but if you give us a check, we're all in. And that can show investors that these guys are serious. They still do this full time. They've made it a product. They're commercialized. They're getting feedback. They may not come from a background, but they're at market. And I think at that point now, what you're looking for between investor and team is a family that can build something together that can then take over.
Yeah. Thank you so much for a fantastic answer, Paul. If you had to give founders three brutally honest truths about building companies in emerging industries, what would they be?
Don't be so fascinated with yourself. That's one. Don't think you have the greatest idea out there because there's others with that same idea. And three, don't always listen to your family. Your family will tell you it's a great idea and you'll believe it. Or your family will tell you have a bad idea and you'll believe it. So don't tell your family shit unless it's your mom and dad. Jeff Bezos' first investors were mom and dad, not cousins, not friends, not uncles. And so I would say that don't think you're the best. Don't be so fascinated with yourself. Don't think you have the greatest idea out there. And don't listen to all your friends and family. Trust your gut.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul, for giving me the time. I know you are traveling internationally right now. And thanks for getting up early to be on this call for this recording. Truly appreciate your effort. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Anshuman. I appreciate it. And I look forward to reshaping 100 years of human habit together with you.
Thank you so much. Bye bye now.
See you. Thank you.